From conception to opening weekend, few movies have had a harder time getting made than Megalopolis. Unfortunately, all that time and energy did little good at the box office, and there are many reasons why. And warning, major spoilers ahead. Aside from Christopher Nolan, Jordan Peele, and James Cameron, how many directors can guarantee a hit on their name alone these days? Even Steven Spielberg isn't a sure thing after West Side Story and The Fabelmans bombed despite excellent reviews. While even a legend like Martin Scorsese has to rely on streaming services to get his movies made, marketing for Megalopolis centered almost entirely around Francis Ford Coppola, a director once held in the same esteem as Spielberg and Scorsese, who hasn't had nearly the same success in his later career. Coppola made his best films in the 1970s. His run of The Godfather, The Conversation, The Godfather Part 2, and Apocalypse Now remains the stuff of legend. His work in the 80s and 90s, however, was more inconsistent. For every solid hit like Bram Stoker's Dracula, there's a disastrous release to match. In fact, Megalopolis isn't the first time he's put up his own money to fund an ambitious utopian tale on the big screen and got burned. The same thing happened with 1981's One from the Heart, which also flopped at the box office. His reputation took a hit and has never really recovered. As such, Coppola isn't frequently on the minds of younger, casual moviegoers, and older moviegoers have good reason to approach his grand return to directing after 13 years away with some degree of skepticism. If Megalopolis was to have any chance of success, it would need to succeed on its own merits, and that hasn't happened.
When does an empire die?
Coppola first conceived of Megalopolis in 1977 as a 4-part operatic experience. He got serious about developing the idea into a movie in 1983 and tried to produce it on and off over the next 4 decades. One would hope such extensive work would allow Coppola to perfect his ideas into a masterpiece. Instead, the final result is a mess packed with too many weird concepts that can't possibly add up. Why does Caesar Catalina freeze time? And what purpose does this power serve him as an architect? Why does he quote all of Hamlet's to be or not to be speech? What's the point of the Russian satellite crashing into New Rome if the aftermath is never addressed? Is Megalon made from Caesar's dead wife, or the power of love, or what? Some of these questions were answered in older versions of the script, with a leaked draft explaining Megalon and Megalopolis more satisfactorily. However, the finished Megalopolis feels like an incoherent grab bag of scenes written at different points in history. If the script itself wasn't messy enough, Coppola had his actors improvise many scenes, which might well have contributed to the jarring tonal differences. Unfortunately, the final product sometimes feels like the characters are in completely different movies. Even with its narrative and tonal problems, one would think a science fiction movie from a visionary director that cost between $120 and $136 million to make would at least be amazing to look at. And yes, Megalopolis does contain some stunning imagery, particularly in the montages where Caesar is tripping on acid and having his shot-up face rebuilt with Megalon. And yet, these moments of grandeur don't appear as often as one would hope. For large chunks of the runtime, Megalopolis alternates between blandly staged dialogue scenes and some of the most amateurish-looking green screen and CG effects to ever appear in a major theatrical release. When an effects-heavy visual wonder like Poor Things can be made for just $35 million, what excuse does Coppola have for Megalopolis looking so cheap? Well, it turns out much of that money never actually made it to screen. Halfway through production, the director fired his entire visual effects team, and members of the art department resigned soon after that. According to multiple sources working on the production, Coppola could never make up his mind about how he wanted the film to look. For all his hatred of Marvel movies, Coppola was responsible for the same scandals that have plagued the Marvel Cinematic Universe: constant last-minute changes resulting in exhausted effects workers and inferior visual effects quality. Coppola had over 4 decades to figure out what his vision should look like, so there's really no excuse for not being able to adequately describe this for his VFX team.
There's still so much to accomplish, but is there time?
Speaking to Rolling Stone, Coppola made a point that the Megalopolis cast was partially made up of canceled actors, and that he didn't want the film to be, quote, deemed some woke Hollywood production. His thinking is somewhat understandable regarding his choice to cast Jon Voight as Hamilton Crassus III, for including a Trump-supporting conservative actor in a film critical of Trump is at least consistent with Caesar's insistence on debating people we disagree with. However, people will surely be scratching their heads as to why Coppola hired Voight's Midnight Cowboy co-star, Dustin Hoffman, as the fixer Nush Berman, given Hoffman was canceled for multiple allegations of sexual harassment. Even more controversial is Shia LaBeouf, who plays the main villain Claudio Pulcher and is set to go on trial for alleged physical and sexual abuse just weeks after the film's opening. Even those who try to separate the art from the artist will have trouble keeping these issues out of their minds when the plot of Megalopolis confronts them by way of Claudio framing Caesar for the statutory rape of underage pop star Vesta Sweetwater. Coppola not only hired actors accused of sexual misconduct, he's also been accused of sexual misconduct on the set of the film himself. The Guardian first reported that Coppola tried to hug and kiss naked female extras while filming a nightclub scene. Then, Variety obtained a video appearing to confirm these reports. While one extra told Deadline that Coppola never made her feel uncomfortable and that the filmmaker was, quote, nothing but professional, another extra claimed that he didn't ask for consent and has sued Coppola for sexual harassment and assault. For his part, Coppola is suing Variety for libel. A statement from Coppola's lawyers published in Deadline calls his accusers jealous and resentful of the fact that Coppola is a, quote, creative genius, proposing that that's why some people spoke out against him. Whether the allegations against the director are true or not, it's likely that these reports made some moviegoers stay away when Megalopolis was released in cineplexes. The only hope a movie as confusing, uncommercial, and controversial as Megalopolis had of making any money rested on critical acclaim. From the time Megalopolis made its world premiere at Cannes, however, it was clear the film was dividing critics. Yes, the film got a 7-minute standing ovation at the prestigious festival, but it seems that acclaim didn't last. As of late September 2024, it has a 49% tomato meter score and a 55 on Metacritic. Even critics who loved the movie had to lay down qualifiers. For example, IGN's Siddhant Adlakha acknowledged the film as frustrating even while praising its, quote, profoundly personal vision and jaw-dropping transformations, and a mixed review by Looper's own Audrey Fox called it objectively bad but audacious as hell. Of course, other critics were even less reserved in their critiques of the film, with Maureen Lee Lenker of Entertainment Weekly concluding her F-grade review by writing, in addition to Coppola being the mastermind behind two of cinema's greatest achievements, he's also now the architect of one of its worst. As of September 2024, Rotten Tomatoes' popcorn meter audience score is at 34%, Metacritic's user score is at a 4.7 out of 10, and IMDb's average rating is a 5.2 out of 10. Even the score on Letterboxd, a site whose cinephile user base is more likely to give an ambitious art film like this one a chance, averages out to 2.5 out of 5. In short, the underwhelming audience reaction to Megalopolis negated any chance of word-of-mouth success, softening the awful opening weekend box office figures. Megalopolis was clearly hard to market, and Lionsgate's big attempt to promote it led to embarrassment. The trailer tried to get ahead of bad festival reviews by showcasing negative responses Coppola had received in the past for The Godfather, Apocalypse Now, and Bram Stoker's Dracula, implying Megalopolis is yet another misunderstood masterpiece. And while other films have been marketed with similarly bad reviews, this is surely the first time someone did this with reviews that didn't actually exist. The quotes about Coppola's past work used in the Megalopolis trailer were fake. Pauline Kael of The New Yorker was quoted as saying that The Godfather was, quote, diminished by its artsiness when she actually adored the film, and the Roger Ebert quote supposedly dismissing Bram Stoker's Dracula as a triumph of style over substance actually came from his review of Tim Burton's Batman.
Forgive my ignorance.
Bad reviews do exist for all of Coppola's most celebrated films, but a now-fired marketing strategist reportedly decided to ask ChatGPT for negative quotes about them rather than taking the time to read the reviews. Lionsgate apologized and the trailer got pulled, leaving Megalopolis with even less marketing visibility and more controversy. At this point, if someone is still interested in Megalopolis, they probably want the full crazy experience that audiences at Cannes and the Toronto International Film Festival got. At those festival screenings, a live actor pretending to be a reporter stood up facing the screen and asked a question to which Caesar responded. This gimmick is already significantly scaled down from Coppola's original vision, in which Amazon Alexa technology would have allowed the audience to ask different questions and Caesar would give the most relevant response. This almost became a reality, but The Verge reports the people working on this concept were laid off in 2022. In most multiplex showings, even the scaled-down interactive theatrical element no longer exists, with Caesar just responding to a voiceover on the soundtrack. Only a few showings at select theaters, labeled The Ultimate Experience, have replicated the live moment that drove critics nuts at film festivals. For reference, Megalopolis averaged $2,157 per theater in its opening weekend, but at New York City's AMC Lincoln Square, which hosted multiple Ultimate Experience screenings, including a preview screening with Coppola in attendance, it made over $84,000. The financial burden of Megalopolis bombing falls mainly on the Coppola family. Not only did Francis Ford Coppola self-fund the production, but his nephew Robert Schwartzman's company Utopia handled much of the marketing.
1, 2, 3. Yippee-yay.
Since Lionsgate only paid for distribution rights and is off the hook for marketing costs, the company might still make money from Megalopolis despite its failure. Nevertheless, it represents another failure for Lionsgate on the back of the $145 million budgeted video game adaptation Borderlands, which bombed at the box office with an $8.8 million domestic opening weekend, a $15.48 million total domestic gross. And that's not all. Even with a more modest budget of around $50 million, the 2024 remake of The Crow also bombed hard with a $4.6 million domestic opening and a $9.27 million domestic total. Other recent Lionsgate releases, including 1992, The Killer's Game, and Never Let Go, arrived with almost no marketing and also brought in little at the box office. The mini-major studio will surely be hoping that its 2025 slate, which includes a Michael Jackson biopic and new installments in the John Wick and Saw franchises, makes up for its disastrous 2024 at the box office. If you or anyone you know has been the victim of sexual assault or child abuse, contact the relevant resources below. The Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network website, or contact RAIN's National Helpline at 1-800-656-HOPE, 1-800-656-4673. The Child Help National Child Abuse Hotline at 1-800-4A-CHILD, 1-800-422-4453, or contact their live chat services.